Buonasera, benvenuti a questo nuovo appuntamento, questo speciale appuntamento con le ali del bruco e Fuorigregge.
Buonasera a tutti.
Ciao Francesco.
Buonasera Alessia, buonasera Bjorgs, grazie per questa nuova opportunità che ci date di incontrare una persona che stimiamo molto.
Allora, io so che tu sei felice non solo per l'eccezionalità del nostro ospite, ma anche perché realizzare questo appuntamento ha significato mettere insieme le competenze di più persone, collaborare. A te questa cosa piace tanto, vero?
Assolutamente sì, è proprio così.
E infatti questo incontro non sarebbe stato possibile senza il nostro amico Filippo Rossi, giornalista che è stato ospite delle Ali del Bruco e di Fuorigregge per la presentazione del suo libro riuscitissimo, direi, Nato per uccidere, Filippo Rossi. Ciao Filippo.
Ciao a tutti ragazzi e grazie mille per questa opportunità. Sono molto felice
Grazie
di
a
essere
te.
qua questa sera.
Grazie a
Naturalmente
te per
Filippo,
questo
ti
onore che ci hai
ringrazio per
fatto.
questa occasione, grazie a Alessia e grazie a tutti voi. Grazie, grazie davvero.
E grazie a Marie, in tutto questo non abbiamo ancora citato Marie che ci supporta perché l'ospite di questa sera non parla in italiano, per cui abbiamo la nostra traduttrice di fiducia che ci supporterà in caso di bisogno. Adesso lascio la parola a Filippo che introdurrà il nostro ospite.
Beh, grazie mille. Allora, innanzitutto vorrei ringraziare anche il mio collaboratore Flavio Vezzaro di Salus Life di Vicenza che collaborerà con me all'organizzazione di questo importante evento che vi svelerò fra qualche momento. Prima di tutto vorrei introdurre l'ospite d'eccezione, come avete detto voi prima, Daniel Estulin, in diretta dal Messico, che arriverà in Italia il 28 e il 29 giugno di quest'anno, quindi fra meno di 2 mesi, per tenere due conferenze, la prima appunto a Verona il 28 e la seconda il 29 a Uboldo, a qualche minuto da Milano. È un evento importantissimo proprio perché Daniel Stulin mancava dall'Italia da più di 10 anni, era stato invitato al tempo, adesso è tanto tempo che diciamo possiamo dire è sparito dai riflettori italiani ed è stata mia premura appunto volerlo reinvitare proprio perché penso che in questa epoca in cui ci troviamo, l'epoca in cui stiamo vivendo, pochi come lui possono spiegarci, possono raccontarci come stanno le cose, cosa dovremmo aspettarci e soprattutto cosa stiamo subendo dall'elite, dal deep state e dai poteri forti in generale. Ovviamente Daniel Estulin, per chi non lo conoscesse già, è autore di svariati bestseller, anche in Italia, il primo dei quali è il Club Bilderberg, che è edito da Macro, e poi ha scritto tantissimi altri libri, l'ultimo dei quali Metapolitica, sempre della medesima casa editrice, e ha raccontato, ha delucidato come i poteri forti influenzano e prendono le decisioni che poi plasmano la nostra realtà. Quindi questa sera sarà molto interessante ascoltare quello che lui ha da dire in chiave preparatoria per gli eventi di Verona e Milano che si terranno appunto a fine giugno, come detto prima, e dei quali poi vi spiegherò come poter acquistare il vostro biglietto e prenotarvi perché i posti sono limitati. Beh, io non mi dilungherei oltre, ringrazio le Ali del Bruco per avermi dato questa opportunità di presentare questo ospite e introdurrei Daniel Estulin. Buonasera Daniel, good afternoon and welcome.
Hello, buonasera. Thank you so much for the
Buonasera.
invitation. Thank you so
So
much for the
Daniel,
invitation.
thanks to you for coming. Thanks for accepting our invitation to come to Italy. First of all, I would like to ask you a couple of questions to understand, to make people understand what will these conferences will be about, and also um, what we will talk about in details. So I would like to just translate to our Italian audience before starting. Ho chiesto a Daniel appunto che cosa, le ragioni di questo evento, di spiegarci brevemente, di andare in profondità sugli argomenti che tratteremo durante le conferenze. So I will start with the first question. So how does the elite control people? I mean, how does the elite control us? Ho chiesto a Daniel come le elite ci controllano al giorno d'oggi.
I think the easiest way to explain it is what you can call systemic control of the society by the elite. So, what is this systemic control, and how does it work in real life? Again, it must be said that, for example, economy and therefore politics, from the earliest development of civilization, has been determined by technology. And so the level of science today has become such that we have literally invaded God's domain. And I think today few will disagree that we're living in conditions of a planetary war. And I call this stage the cold hybrid pre-war stage. Now, what do I mean by that? Okay, it's a multi-level operation. So, for example, the elite, they find the target state that they want to subjugate. It could be Russia, Venezuela, Cuba, North Korea, Iran, it doesn't matter. Anyone, including the United States of America. And the next step, phase one, you apply maximum pressure on the country question. So you have this all-out attack against absolutely all spheres of society. Education, culture, economy, science, defense, security, sports, etc., everything. And today this war is underway on all fronts. And we, the people of planet Earth, we are losing this war. So what phase of this conflict we're in today? We're in a phase in preparing for the second stage of this war. And what is this stage? It's called direct slavery. And so today the situation of colonization and physical slavery has been replaced by technological slavery. And in the past, it was done via military aggression. And today, you do it with the support of advanced technologies. Let me give you a very simple example. What's internet? It's a digital gulag under the control of the big brother within the confines of this permanent hybrid war. Except that, unlike the gulag in the Soviet Union during Stalin time, when victims were taken away at night and locked up in concentration camps, placed behind barbed wire fences. Today, all these people everywhere, they have voluntarily asked authorities to be admitted to this concentration camp. And it is they, the people, who dream of being inside this electronic concentration camp. And they are very happy and comfortable within the confines of this stupid make-believe world. And this collective degradation that we're experiencing as society is palpable. You could feel it. So a world where, for example, physics and mathematics are considered racist subjects invented by white people. This is what they're saying in the United States. Okay? So if you tell people that everything you need to know is freely available in Wikipedia, that there's no need to study, there's no need to know how to read, that everything is on the internet, that 2 + 2 is 22, and that whoever tells you that 2 + 2 is 4, well, that person is a racist. I'm not making this up. This is what they're doing in the United States. And so the next step, we're building a society absolutely dependent on this concentration camp technology to survive. And so what I was saying a few minutes ago about the need to have this information independence to survive in this world of meta systems, we need to have information independence. Now, if you cut off access to the people, to the internet, most of these people will have no idea how to survive because they're empty. Their brain is empty, clueless. So that's one thing. And the second thing which I want to explain has to do with human cognition. I want to explain it in easy to understand terms. What we have here is a color revolution. Now, what's this? This is the use, and I talk about this in my book on Tavistock Institute. This is the use of cognitive technologies to manipulate the consciousness of the masses. So what do I need to do first? First, I need to dumb down the masses, make them stupid. Simplify the education system, lower everyone's IDs. Now, I don't know about Italy, but this is what they're doing in Canada and the United States. For example, mathematics. According to Stanford University studies, black people have more trouble with math than Asian people or white people. So what's the solution? Declare math a racist subject invented 5,000 years ago by Egyptians or Greek racists who intuitively hated Black Lives Matter. So in the United States, in most schools, math is out, science gone, logic canceled, philosophy, which is the cornerstone of any scholastic knowledge, triple canceled. And furthermore, philosophy is one of the most, according to them, racist fields in the world, if you listen to the ideologues of the new normal in the United States. Because every world-renowned philosopher is white and therefore is racist. And they're saying, no, there's no African philosophers, no transgender philosophers, no declared unicorn, done, gone. And so they teach you fake history, they teach you fake geography, they teach you fake science, and they break up knowledge into smaller and smaller mini versions of a whole universal. And they fill your head with stupid flat earth theories, ETs, UFOs, aliens. They substitute real history for invented nonsense. And next thing, you give everyone an iPhone, you put up a satellite, and you can control and manipulate the dialectic of the entire planet via mind control propaganda, ready-made revolutions. And well, it's just a matter of time of the application of cognitive technologies. In other words, you have total government control of mass consciousness, control of information, and through information, you control the population. You have color revolutions, you change governments, and people start believing everything that the media tells them. And so I can overthrow any government that I want, and it costs nothing, okay? Because people will believe anything that the media tells them. Okay, so how does this work? Let me explain it in simple terms. How does the world work from a historical vantage point? This is the ideology of the Western world. At first, many years ago, we had the slave owners, and there were very few in numbers, and they all had slaves. Okay? And this modus operandi did not resist the test of time. And eventually, the Roman Empire gave way to the feudalist order. And the slave owners, they were forced to share some things with the former slaves. But this system could not resist the test of time either. And feudalism was replaced with a capitalist system where each ex-slave, he bought a small car, a small house, a vacation for 2 weeks in Disneyland or wherever. Why? For the simple reason that slaves were physiologically the same people as the slave owners. And so first they multiplied without control. And second, the slaves also wanted to eat at least 2 or 3 times a day. And third, they all developed self-awareness. And as a result, you had another Spartacus who wanted to become a slave owner. And the system changed again and again and again. And therefore, the elite, they had this dream of creating a new subspecies who possessed a limited cognitive capacity, who are easily reproducible in a synthetic and cheap way. And today you can do that, okay? Especially as we're moving from the industrial to post-industrial to trans-industrial technological paradigm, okay? In other words, the transhumanism. And so today, from the point of view of the elite, for the first time in history of civilization, there's this technological opportunity to create a new homo, let's call it homo mejores. How? With genome editing. And so what's that? Genome or gene editing. It's a group of technologies that give scientists the ability to change your organism's DNA. And these technologies allow genetic material to be added, to remove, to alter, to change your genome. Let me give you an example. Growing a baby outside the womb of a woman is known as ectogenesis. Okay, now according to Deakin University studies in the United States, an artificial womb would need an outer shell or chamber. Okay, that's somewhere to implant the embryo and protect it as it grows. And so you have an artificial womb would need a synthetic replacement or amniotic fluid, a kind of a shock absorber in the womb during the pregnancy. Okay, and so researchers basically build an artificial placenta. And again, for the women, the uterus, that's not a very difficult, not a very complex organ. And so we take an artificial uterus, we take an incubator in the same way almost as if you incubator for chickens. And then you have artificial insemination. We genetically shorten the gestation period from 9 months to 2 months, and you get as many of this homo mejores with very limited cognitive abilities as you need. And today, technology can do this. And as I said at the beginning, we have entered the domain of God. Okay? And now I want to warn you, we are losing this war. Humanity is losing the war against the global elite. So what would we need to do to learn from the elite to change the dynamics of this game? Well, you see, the elite, they play a very long game. Because most people, like, we plan, what are you going to do on Saturday? What are you going to do next week? Maybe a couple of months in the summer. But the elite plan hundreds, if not thousands of years ahead. So, for example, at the end of World War II in 1945, the Soviet Union was celebrating victory over Nazi Germany, okay? And the elite were planning Soviet Union's collapse 50 years later. That's the difference between us and them. And I want to repeat, what's under assault are not our individual human rights, but rather the very institution of the nation-state republic from the oligarchy's massive social engineering program conducted through Tavistock Institute and much larger centers of integrated networks and engineering centers, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? And so the idea, this is what we're seeing right now. And then the idea is, again, you destroy who we are, okay? And it's not the people, it's we, not the elite who are destroying America, who are destroying Italy, who are destroying our culture, okay? Because people don't understand, because they're, for example, they're protesting against the state, and they don't understand that the state is the only instrument that can guarantee the right and freedoms of the people, okay? And this is too done by design. And then once you have destroyed the system, you can do whatever you want. And at the same time, we have declining fertility. For example, 56 million children are aborted each year in the world. And you have this incessant propaganda from Bill Gates and George Soros and organizations such as Child Free Family, which is funding for $100 million per year these events. And again, the vaccines, they're not the vaccines to save you from COVID, but they're a vital element of reformatting of the new world order as per the needs of the elite, because we have reached the limits of growth within this model called Bretton Woods.
Well, what you're describing is just terrifying, let's say. So this is very important for people to know, because awareness is maybe the first step to make a change. So Daniel, you to sum it up, you were talking about a kind of full-scale 2.0 slavery mode that is going to be, or it is right now being implemented above us. Most of the time without us being conscious. So how would you describe, let's say you were talking about a big concentration camp, you were talking about slavery, you were talking about human eugenetics, we can call it in general, maybe social engineering, what you also described very well in your Tavistock Institute book. So how would you describe the world from now to the next 20 years? Ho chiesto a Daniel, ho detto semplicemente che la situazione sembra terrificante, ma appunto il fatto di aumentare la consapevolezza è il primo passo poi per creare qualche cosa o prendere delle contromisure. Ho detto che, per riassumere quello che lui ha detto, è una specie di, quello che lui ha descritto è una specie di schiavitù 2.0 che descrive anche delle misure di ingegneria sociale. Ecco, gli ho chiesto come vede lui il mondo da oggi a 20 anni in questa prospettiva? Please.
What the deep state wants is total transparency and control about everything we do and think. And what it demands, the deep state, is complete privacy for its own actions, whether we're talking about budget, courts, monetary policies. And so without transparency, there's no way to hold deep state officials accountable. Without privacy, there's no way you and I can be free. And unfortunately, our privacy is under attack. It's under attack in Italy, it's under attack in England, it's under attack in Spain, where they arrest you when you put a tweet or a Facebook message critical of the government. They say, so did you publish this? We're going to put you in prison. We're going to take your children away. Okay? And so we've reached a dangerous tipping point in American society. And so the financial freedom literally hangs in a balance, and it could go either way. We could either win or we could lose. It all depends on us. And so right now, the hands wielding this powerful technology tools are concentrated, malicious, and opaque. Okay? They're invisible. Technology is there, and all this is being done to us. They're using that technology to demand and enforce more transparency in everything we do, but not anything that they do. But having, for example, financial independence, we need not to be dependent on the state. We must be free mentally, intellectually, financially. But to have this financial independence does give us an element of freedom and flexibility. And that's why it's so important to preserve it. Okay? And so with this financial freedom, protecting your wealth, for example, from the coming stock crash, building non-financial wealth, going dark, in other words, making yourself invisible, okay, we at least have a fighting chance. And that's a good start, because it's coming, and you cannot not see that. And so the deep state is not a well-organized, tightly run conspiracy. It's a cartel of interests. And this cartel of interests is brought together for the sake of wealth, the sake of power, the sake of privilege, the sake of self-preservation at the expense of the Constitution, honest money, stock market that produces real prices, okay, et cetera, et cetera. But who's in charge? That's what people say. Is it Bilderberg? Is it Washington, the Pentagon, the Federal Reserve, Wall Street, UFOs, space aliens? The answer, except for the space aliens, all of them are in charge. And so the deep state is waging three major campaigns against the original idea, for example, of America: a limited government, low taxes, rule of law, individual liberty, sound money. This is what we're seeing right now. And also, let's not forget the role of big data in making this perpetual war against everything possible. And so big data has become a tool for the deep state to manage, to modify, to manipulate the public. They know everything about us. We know nothing about them. And so you have tech companies, for example, whose very origins are rooted in the ambition of the deep state to control American, but society in general. They now monitor our phone records, our financial records, your medical records, your online conversations, when you go to church, who you have sex with, what you say to your friends on the internet, whether you're cheating on your wife, who your friends are, the books you're reading, the movies you see, bad jokes you make. They know everything about us. And they aim to know you better than we know ourselves. And they're coming together with a deep state at a very philosophical level to restrict the flow of information you receive about what's really going on in the world, to manipulate your opinions by determining what you see and hear, and to control your money. And that's why when you watch a video on YouTube, when you talk to your friends, suddenly you have a commercial offering you a product that you just talked to your friend about. How do they know? Because they listen to everything you say. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's a reality. Technology works. Now, what's their ultimate aim? A society controlled by a wealthy elite, okay, with no dissent, no privacy, and no win-win relationship. Because there's two ways when you look at society. Okay, you can have this society or you have this society. And this society is we all work together. We have children, we have grandchildren, we want to work together, make this a better world. We have to look after our old people, our grandparents. We have to make sure that our children are good people, okay? And we share. And you have this version of society where the elite are saying, I am not sharing anything with you. You are going to be my slave. And I'm going to do everything I can to control you and take everything from you and give it to me. And these two versions of society, okay, there's no middle ground. It's either us or it's them.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Daniel. So a very important instrument, a very important weapon, you mentioned it before, is the psychological war. So can you tell a little bit about this topic to our audience? Ho chiesto, scusate, mi sono dimenticato di tradurre, ho chiesto a Daniel che uno strumento, un'arma molto importante che ha in mano il deep state o comunque le elite che controllano è l'arma della guerra psicologica. Gli ho chiesto di approfondire un po' questo argomento. Please.
When we talk about psychological warfare, we're talking about modern technologies of political change management. That's what it is. Modern technologies of political change management. And when talking about hybrid warfare, we would necessarily be analyzing the specifics of psycho-historical warfare. In other words, the technologies of political coup d'etat, cultural codes as a kind of a tool for moderating political behavior. And so in practice, psychological warfare means the transfer of ideological and political struggle from the sphere of theoretical consciousness to the sphere of ordinary consciousness. When, for example, one appeals not so much to scientific and logical arguments, not to reason, not even to facts, but to some kind of a crazy irrational phenomena. And these include emotions, instincts, for example, social, national pride, sovereign ambitions, instincts of social, national self-preservation, etc., etc. So what I mean to say is, okay, there's a big difference between thinking and feeling. And so many times when you see journalists on the street make questions to the people, so what do you think about so-and-so? And the person is answering, I think, well, he's not saying that. Because to think, okay, you have to read a lot, you have to ponder, you have to analyze, you have to do all kinds of, things, intellectual things. And most people don't know how to think, unfortunately. And what this person is saying, not I think, but I feel. And feelings are universal. You cannot argue with feelings. My feelings are as good as your feelings, which is why in politics, when one party, uses feelings and the other party uses logic, the one that uses emotional element always wins, because thinking is hard, feeling is easy. And so the task of this transfer, of the struggle from one sphere to another, is to bring it to the level of everyday psychology in such a way that this struggle, okay, permeates all the problems of people's lives and explains them through some kind of a, I guess you could say, political confrontation. And you get to this, you achieve this due to massive introduction into the minds of the people everywhere of many different false stereotypes of perception and thinking. So, for example, all the Russians people, they're drunks, they drink vodka. I don't drink vodka. I don't drink, period. I've never in my life drank alcohol. I don't like alcohol. So not all Russians drink alcohol and drink vodka. Okay? All the Russians wrestle with bears. That's not true. Okay? So these are the kinds of stereotypes they introduce into your brain, perverted ideas about the views prevailing in their environment. And so in times of peace and conditions of this forceful confrontation with a potential adversary, what happens is that psychological warfare acts as a kind of one of the main components of political confrontation. Let me give you an example. Goebbels' propaganda in Germany, okay? It came from the cynical assumption that in order to be effective, you have to be massive propaganda, blatant propaganda, and continuous. The more massive is a lie, the more you repeat the same story, the more people are going to believe you. They're going to say, well, they can't make this thing up. It's just too big a lie. Yes, they can. Look at COVID. Look at all these other wars. weapons of mass destruction, Saddam Hussein, etc., etc., etc. And so another key element of, if we're talking about hybrid warfare, is this imperceptible penetration into consciousness. For example, you see advertisements. We all see advertisements of America. Beautiful, carefree lifestyle, cowboy, horseback, good looking, people, having drinks, entertainment, swimming in the sea. Okay. Oh, the Soviet citizens, for example, in my country, what was the propaganda? You want to be like America. And so in our country, if you had Levi's jeans or if you had, a Parker ballpoint pen, it's like having a Ferrari today. It was a status. I have jeans, Levi's from the United States, and you don't. And so all of these are elements of psychological warfare. And that's the most effective war against the poorly educated strata of society. You can destroy countries, and it's very cheap. But psychological warfare not only targeted the Soviets or the communists, it also targeted the Americans through many different projects. For example, MK Ultra. There were 149 sub-projects of this MK Ultra, and many of them related to behavior modification, hypnosis, drug effects, psychology, true sermons, pathogens, toxins, etc., etc., etc. And this is what they're doing to us. And unless you understand how this control is exercised globally, you can't fight it because you don't know who the enemy is. Because it's very easy if somebody points a gun to your head, this guy is a bad guy. But if you do this psychological warfare, you can't see it, which means unless you understand it, you have no idea how to fight it. And that's what we're seeing right now, which is why it's so important to understand all these types of wars being waged against us, because we need to unite. There's not enough people on our side. And again, we are losing this war because unfortunately the bad guys, the global elite, the deep state, they have a lot of tools at their disposal. And we, the people globally, the Italians, the Spanish, the Russians, the Americans, normal people, we simply don't have the knowledge to know how to fight them. And we need this knowledge now because the time is short.
Exactly. So it looks like we are living in a kind of a matrix, let's say, so an invented reality as well, right? Because from what you were saying, like this imperceptible penetration in our consciousness looks like they are trying to make us living their own made their own self-made world, let's say. So is this something that matches your point of view? Ho chiesto a Daniel appunto se tutto ciò che avviene con il condizionamento, con la guerra psicologica, ha a che vedere anche con il fatto che noi noi viviamo in una specie di matrix, no? In una realtà virtuale, una realtà creata appositamente per mantenerci schiavi. Questo è il succo di quello che ho detto, please.
When we're talking about realities, we're talking about models. So we organize our society, and with it, our government and our culture, our industries, businesses, around models. And these are basically, what's a model? It's agreed upon rules, practices, protocols for how we operate. And so you have the official reality is about hiding an agenda under the guise of reporting facts. That's what the media does. Okay, they're reporting facts, but they're really hiding a secret government agenda because there's no such thing as free mainstream media. It doesn't exist. And so you have this whole bunch, many people, okay, overtly and covertly, openly and invisibly, at all levels of society, whose job is to make it seem like a false reality is the real reality. It's like in a matrix. And the agenda, of course, is to convince people of certain things and force them to do things and prevent them from doing other things, which are bad for the elite and good for the people. And one of the things that locks us into this official reality is that it's easy to figure out, it's not easy to figure out what this reality is. We can say that the mainstream media, they're technologies of control. And today, reality is fiction, and fiction is reality. So we realize that people don't believe something is reality until you see it on, on the front page of New York Times or CNN or Fox or one of the corporate media. And for most people, corporate media is still very important because the mainstream media is constantly busy looking for ways to appear to be a reliable source when they're not. And another thing I want to mention is false flag operations. In other words, the ability to create this official reality using violence. And that's becoming more and more common. So there's this new norm in America: chaos, race wars, mass shootings. You see it also in Italy, you see it in Spain, you see it globally. Okay? So the fallacy is enabling America's transition from what it was, which was a country of law and order, to a country of chaos, of fear, a daily psychological operations played against the general public. And again, we're seeing the same thing in France and Spain and Germany, in the UK. Some migrant killed 16 people driving a car. There's a shooting, there's a stabbing. All these horrible things are happening. There's a blackout at the same time. These are all psychological operations. And so the millennial generation may find that what I'm about to say is absolutely incredible, considering the world we live in. But there was a time when people could actually plan for a future. And so for the first time in modern history, we have a generation today that doesn't know what it's like not to be at war. This generation lives in a perpetual state of war. And now with the ruling elite putting their plans in motion to achieve their new world order, we're seeing a new level of chaos, new level of fear, slowly becoming the new norm, which millennials especially are being led to believe is absolutely inevitable and unavoidable reality. And so the chaos that was once, long time ago or not so long ago, confined, to that over there, far away, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, dark Africa, okay? We're used to seeing it on television, but not see it live, in our streets. But that's moving into the United States, into Canada, into Europe, into Italy, into France, into civilized world. And the speed at which the events are now being orchestrated, they present a challenge for truth seekers and alternative media, unlike anything we have seen before. And it's very difficult because the elite have the advantage, because they keep changing their reality. And we have to explain to people that the parallel reality is actually the real reality. And the real reality is a lie.
Wow, that's a challenging concept to understand, but I think it's critical, it's pivotal to understand. Just a word I would like to ask you, because I think it's important. You mentioned in your webinars and in your interviews, you mentioned a level above this deep state. So we know that the deep state is usually called, it was the Bilderberg, and then the CFR, Club of Rome, etc., the Freemasonry, etc. So we hear a lot of secret societies that should rule the world. But from what you say, from your perspective, there should be a level above. So can you just introduce it, because I think it's important for people to know, and maybe you will be able to go in depth when you will be in Italy. But can you tell us how is the structure of this deep state, of this global elite? Ho chiesto a Daniel praticamente di spiegarci un pochettino chi sono queste elite globali. Conosciamo le società segrete come il Bilderberg, il Club di Roma, il CFR, eccetera, ma non sappiamo perfettamente chi sta sopra di loro, se c'è un livello sopra di loro, che tra l'altro Daniel spiega nei suoi webinar, nelle sue interviste. Please.
Yeah, so I'll definitely go into it in depth at our conferences in Italy. But, well, first of all, Bilderberg is not a secret society. They have a webpage. Okay, I've never heard of a secret society with a web page. And it's true that they are a secretive private organization that have been around since 1954, but they're not, I'd say they're at most mid-level managers. They don't make any decisions. They're given certain decisions with the objective of Bilderberger, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the Pinay Circle, and other organizations at that level to actually spread this message into the general population. But the decisions are taken at a much higher level by people who are obviously involved in planning and organizing things at a much higher level. We're talking about, the time-wise. And so one of the things you have to understand that above nation states, above countries, you have groups such as the globalists and the ultra globalists. And the difference between the two is that, for example, people like Klaus Schwab, they're the ultra globalists, and the idea of these ultra globalists, they don't need the idea of a country. They have no need for countries. Their idea is you dismantle countries, you destroy all these institutions of a nation state, and you create what's known as one world company limited, corporations that have more power than any government on the planet. Example, you have BlackRock, you have Vanguard Group, companies such as that, which have, again, more power than pretty much any government on the planet. And then the globalists, such as Donald Trump. Okay, their idea is that let's maintain the International Monetary Fund, let's maintain the World Bank, let's maintain the middle class, something that the ultra globalists have no need for. They don't need the middle class anymore, the productive. They have no need for the productive economy. They need to destroy the middle class. And that's why during COVID, we saw the transfer of wealth, where the middle class, us, we became poorer, the rich became even richer, and most of us became poor or very poor. And that's the idea. Anyway, I'm going to explain this in our conference, the idea of what's being done, how this entire concept of dismantling capitalism, because that's what we're seeing right now. Capitalism, as we know it, has reached the limits of growth. And that's we're coming to the world of post-capitalism, which the elite themselves need to create. They're dismantling the system which no longer works. But because they have no language to explain what's coming around the corner. Because again, what we're seeing right now, today, globally, we've only seen twice in the last 2,000 years. The first time between the 4th and the 6th centuries, when the Roman Empire collapsed and feudalism came about, and about 1,000 years later, between the 16th and the 17th centuries, when feudalism died and modern-day capitalism came into its own. And that modern-day capitalism today is on its deathbed, because it's based on a very simple concept, premise. Expansion at somebody else's expense. It means you keep taking over countries, taking over their resources, and growing bigger at their expense, except that we've reached the limit of growth on the planet Earth. You can't expand beyond the space of planet Earth. And that's why we have a problem today, because for the first time in history, we have no language to describe what's coming around the corner. And by language, I don't mean Italian or Spanish or Russian or French or German. I mean the language of the economy. We have no way. We have no knowledge of what's awaiting us a very short term. And that's why we have this crisis globally, because in the First and the Second World Wars, you can destroy the world and rebuild it. Okay? And that's what they did after First World War. That's what they did in the Second World War. And you have this glorious period between 1945 and 1975. But right now you can't do that, because you have all these countries with nuclear weapons. You have Pakistan, you have India, we have North Korea, maybe Iran, and everybody else. And so the elite is saying, maybe it's not a good idea. Okay? And so the idea is that if it's not a good idea to destroy the world, how are we going to survive? And they have no answer to that question. And what we're seeing right now, okay, is the next stage of human development. So we went from nation states, that's Westphalia, okay, to one world company limited, corporations that have more power than any government on the planet. And now we're coming into regionalization of global economy. The global economy is shrinking, and so we're going to regionalize the world. And so, for example, Brexit and BRICS, they were the first two attempts to try to regionalize the world. And that's where we're going to right now. Regions, North American region, Canada, United States, Mexico, Latin American, Europe, Paris, Berlin axis, China, India, etc., as regions of the world. But again, we have no language to explain how this mechanism is going to work. What's the exchange system it's going to be? There's lots of questions and there's very few answers. And there is even fewer time. And that's the problem. Time. We have no time before the global impending collapse.
An important, let's say, another very important topic regarding economics is the Bitcoin. So the crypto world, which is raising since, let's say, more than 10 years, is seen by half of the people as the protector against a possible collapse of the economy, a protector against the banks, etc. And from the other side, there is the other part of the world who says that Bitcoin is controlled by is just another way for the elite to shift their power and subdue people in another way. So what is your point of view? Ho chiesto a Daniel di parlare un attimino del Bitcoin, dell'argomento delle criptovalute, perché vediamo al giorno d'oggi una divisione fra chi pensa che il Bitcoin sia un salvatore, una salvaguardia contro il collasso del sistema e contro le banche, contro le elite che vogliono depauperare le persone, e dall'altra parte invece c'è chi della visione opposta proprio pensa che sia un nuovo modello, una nuova strategia del potere di accaparrarsi le risorse e di schiavizzare le persone. Ho chiesto la sua opinione, please.
So I'll give you a brief version. Bitcoin is an intel operation. It's an intelligence operation. So if you look at the people at this supranational level and how they're running this intelligence operation, it's a very dynamic system. There's something else that you have to understand about how the global power works. So you have centralized political control leads to centralized control of wealth as well. Now, isn't it ironic, if you think about it, that one of the primary goals of Bitcoin, the creation of a universal digital currency, is also a primary goal of the globalists, the New World Order, with its aspirations for replacing national sovereignty with a one world government and arguably the deep state. Now, think about that. So we have a governance structure that is invisible. We talked about this. And we have part of that governance structure is the financial system. And it's a subset. And you can't change or redesign the financial system without understanding and having a design of the tools for your governance system. So thinking that the changes in financial system are going to help improve the governance system is absolutely crazy, because the two of these elements are intimately integrated. And if you look at all of this in perspective, so we have a governance system, okay, that has very little or zero integrity. We have a financial system that has zero integrity. And now we have the information system that has zero integrity. And if you think you can create a digital product or platform on the information systems that have no integrity and use it to change the financial system in a way that doesn't have integrity, and you're going to improve the governance system, this is absolutely crazy. And one thing I did want to point out is I think one of the most powerful attractions of blockchain technology and cryptocurrency, that first and foremost, within the population, there's a very powerful desire to create money and create currency. And so the greatest desire is local currencies. Local currencies. Now, one interesting thing about this prototype is that the deep state is encouraging and allowing the prototyping of virtual currencies, but the deep state is not allowing the prototyping of local currencies. Why aren't they? I think the reasons are obvious.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So, Daniel, I think we don't have much time left. I would ask you a last question regarding Europe, and specifically, what is the strategy that Europe should, let's say, implement or use in this situation? Since we are talking, we will be in Italy, we will be in Europe. Ho chiesto a Daniele l'ultima domanda, poiché non abbiamo più così tanto tempo, che riguarda l'Europa, quindi qual è la strategia che in tutto questo, in questa situazione dovrebbe adottare l'Europa in generale, visto che ci troviamo in Italia. Please.
Well, the focus is on the conservative forces in Europe, because today modern Europe is right-wing liberal, and their task is to save and preserve European civilization no matter what. Now, if you look at today's Europe, what is it? Its meanings, for example, and its ideas are fully exhausted. The cultural code of Europe, what is that? It's non-existent. So it's a combination of the effects of the birth control, social change, political progress, economic necessity, which has produced a kind of a tipping point for society. In other words, the biosocial system has lost, I guess you could say, basic instincts and is not capable of reproduction. And also civilization ceased to be Christian, could not get back to becoming pagan. That's because the Third Reich lost, but became a kind of a destructive, ecologically satanic civilization. And so the attempts to integrate this urban neo-barbarians failed. I'm talking about all these people from Africa, from the Middle East, because the newcomers, okay, they're not ready for anything constructive. They don't know how to build, they just know how to destroy. And so if existing trends continue, then in the coming years, Europe will be thrust back to the Dark Ages, which is, again, to the period shortly after the collapse of the Roman Empire. And so the crisis is absolutely evident. I mean, you can't not see it. And it's absolutely inevitable. But the question is, can Europe manage the crisis? Because, again, people have learned how to manage individual crisis, a collective crisis of a small country. So why not take another step to learn how to manage a crisis at the level of people, ethnic groups, super ethnic groups? And today, the construction of Europe on liberal principles is no longer an option. If you look in Europe, it doesn't matter if we're talking about Italy, we're talking about Spain, we're talking about France, Germany. It's the deplorable state of the old continent is the result of what? Of thoughtlessness by its leaders, of total lack of foresight following the liberal cause. Have these people not studied in school? Do they not know what happened to the Roman Empire and the barbarians? Are they not repeating the same mistakes again? And so today, European continent as a whole will not only be able to reassemble itself based on conservative principles, that's the only way it can survive. Okay, and so we're looking at competition between the left communist idea and right, which is a nationalist idea. And so the result will be some kind of a morphed state, national communism. Okay, more left than right, but with a powerful archaic influence. And so the people of Europe, they need new cultural, they need new ethnic codes, which will be a continuation of Christian and ancient Europe. And it's necessary to start this process, I guess you could say, of this new ethnogenesis. And taking into account the fact of the basis of the separation of people into groups is based on differences in language and religion, this change will be very important. And in the history of Europe, there existed this interesting plan of preservation of European culture of meaning. In other words, the Roman Empire, or as it was later called, Byzantium. But there's one problem with Byzantium. It had no concept of the future. It lived in the past. Okay? And today you need something, some visionary idea that can take you to the future. And so for Europe to survive, I think it's important to create this new Byzantium. And with New Byzantium, Vienna is going to play the role of Constantinople. And so Europe will be rebuilt around this new core, rejecting this liberal, horrible liberal ideas, okay, and accepting and building on the conservative principles. Now, who is going to be part of this new European core? For example, the Austrians, the Hungarians. It's the rebirth of the Austro-Hungarian Empire under the control of the Vatican, conceptually speaking, which have had conceptual understanding of the world for over 2,000 years. Okay, and that's what we have right now in Europe. We have the rebirth of the Fourth Reich, Roman Empire of Germanic nations. So it's going to be Austria, it's going to be Hungary, it's going to be Northern Italy, maybe a little, some parts of Spain, Okay, Serbia, Croatia, Bavaria, East Germany. Okay, and then you're going to have other groups. So basically, Europe is going to divide into separate. Forget about European Union. That's gone. Europe is going to divide into different levels. So this is going to be first Europe. Like think of it as Champions League in football, where Madrid, Barcelona, Juventus, Inter are playing. By the way, congratulations to Inter for being in the final. And the second group, okay, this is going to be the Hansa League, the Scandinavian countries, Belgium and Holland, and maybe England, if they can't find their own economic area. And then the third is going to be zombie land, like in the movie World War III Zombies. Okay, periphery, territory, no man's land. Spain, Portugal, southern Italy, Romania, Bulgaria, all that's left. Okay, and so the last time this happened, speaking of the barbarians, they were only able to delay the destruction because Rome was destroyed, Italy was depopulated, imperial regalia sent to Constantinople. And we can only hope that perhaps this time around, it will start a new kind of a European cycle without having to go through the dark centuries we went through way back when.
Well, Daniel, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Posso fare un'ultima domanda al volo
Prego.
a Daniel, se mi aiuta Marie. Visto lui ha ripetuto più volte che siamo in guerra e ovviamente la maggior parte delle persone non ne è consapevole e che abbiamo pochissimo tempo, abbiamo poco tempo. Ecco, dal punto di vista individuale, qual è la prima cosa di cui ci dobbiamo preoccupare? La prima cosa anche a livello proprio di atteggiamento personale di cui ci dobbiamo occupare?
I think have plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D. Have as many passports as possible. Okay, you're gonna have hunger. You're gonna have blackouts, as we saw in Spain the other day. So be ready, prepare for what's coming. What's coming is not pretty. Okay, build communities of people who are aware of what's going on. You need people who think like you. Okay, think during COVID, they isolated us, they locked us up in 3 weeks. The entire population of the planet Earth, 8 billion people, were locked up in 3 weeks. Okay, it's insane. We've been fighting for thousands of years to be free, and in 3 weeks, they locked us up because they know us better than we know ourselves. We have to have no fear. We have to understand that the fight is for survival of humanity. It's us against them. Us against them. Build communities. You build friends who think like you, who can give something to the community. Don't argue with people who think that, crazy conspiracy theories are, if it's not on the cover of New York Times, it's not true. If Rai is not talking about it, it's not true. Forget about these people. We have no time. We need to prepare. What's coming is unlike anything we've seen in the history of mankind. If you want to survive, be ready for what's coming.
Ok. Thank you.
Penso che è stato abbastanza chiaro, Daniel. Io, prima di lasciarvi chiudere, Alessia e ragazzi, voglio ringraziare tantissimo Daniel, voglio ringraziare voi per avermi dato questa grande opportunità di poter avere Daniel qua. Thank you very much, Daniel, for your time and for your very interesting interview.
Filippo, presenta le copertine che abbiamo degli eventi.
Pensavo, appunto, volevo presentare brevemente l'evento ancora, ricordarlo, quindi sabato 28 giugno, come potete vedere, in provincia di Verona, San Martino Buonalbergo, in ristorante Fabbrica in Pedavena, dalle 15 alle 18:30, mentre domenica 29 giugno, quindi il giorno dopo, dalle 15:30 alle 19:30, a Rubbiolandia 2, a Uboldo, che si trova a una decina di minuti da Milano. Per prenotare il vostro biglietto potete andare sul sito di Libreria Libera, quindi www.librerialibera.ch. Poi nella descrizione apparirà anche il link dove potete poi prenotare il vostro biglietto cliccando sulla serata, sul pomeriggio di Verona o su quello di Milano. Ecco, quindi penso di aver spiegato tutto, quindi lascio la parola a voi e vi ringrazio moltissimo. Thank you again, Daniel, and see you soon in Italy.
Thank you. Grazie. Ciao.
Grazie
Ciao,
ragazzi,
grazie
grazie a
Filippo,
tutti, grazie a tutti. Bene, alla prossima, grazie Filippo, ti aspettiamo di nuovo qui, anzi mi ci aggiungo così perché sennò alla fine sembra che non ci sono, eccomi qua. Ci rivediamo presto con nuovi tuoi approfondimenti qua sul canale, te ne siamo molti grati.
Grazie mille.
Una buona
Grazie,
serata a
buona
tutti.
serata.
Ciao.
Grazie
Ciao.
mille.
Ciao.
Ciao a tutti.
Ciao. Ciao.
Ciao.
Ciao.